Hello? Is it on? Oh, okay. Well, as I said, Neil asked me if I would talk for 10 minutes on some subject without notes. And I've been wondering, what was he up to? What was he trying to do? And I finally figured it out. You know, he's interested in these outreach programs. And I have this feeling that he's trying to develop a Comedy Central for the JCB. And we guinea pigs are to be the stand-up comics in the future. Whether we'll succeed or not and get a hook, I don't know. I have no notes, but I have no jokes either. My subject is the word disinterestedness, or disinterested. It's a word that George Washington loved. He used it all the time in describing himself. It was his synonym for virtue. That is the classical notion of submerging your private interests into the public good. But that's not how we use it today. Very sophisticated publications like the New York Times or the Washington Post use disinterested to mean uninterested, not caring, unengaged. That was not the 18th century meaning. The 18th century meaning was to be, you could be interested, but you transcended your interest. It was to be unbiased, to be impartial, to be objective, to be even-handed, to stand above the interest. It's almost as if we can't imagine anyone today being free of interest. And as a consequence, this older meaning has drifted away from us. Now, both meanings are in the dictionary now, but I think by and large most people use the modern meaning to be unengaged, uninterested, not as Washington saw it. Now, that term was very important to the 18th century Anglo-American world. It went back to the classical past. Their feelings about parties, they hated parties because parties were partial. And you're supposed to be non-partial, impartial, above an interest. And they went back to the classical past to get ideas about that. Aristotle had said, not everybody is free of interests, and they knew that. Some people are better able to transcend interests than others. So it's a very elitist. They were unabashedly elitist. Some people are capable of this more than others. Aristotle said that merchants and artisans are incapable of being citizens. They lack virtue. They can never transcend their interests. They're too engaged in the making of money. The idea is to find somebody who's free of that. And Adam Smith said the same thing in the 18th century. Who can be the ideal political leaders? And for Smith, the ideal were the landed gentry of England, whose income came from rents without exertion. The rents just came in, and the bailiff collected them. They didn't have to exert themselves, therefore they're free of the temptations of interest. And as a consequence, right through the Industrial Revolution, the British politics was led by these landed gentry. Downton Abbey and Lord Grantham are the end of that era. You're seeing the end of it when you watch Downton Abbey. Now, in America in the 18th century, there weren't many landlords who could live off tenants. But there were the Southern planters whose income came without exertion also, but they had slaves. But as a consequence, those Southern planters saw themselves as being the counterparts to the English gentry, landed gentry, capable of political leadership. And they made the most of that and treated the Northern leaders, those money-grubbing Yankees, with scorn. Now, Washington in the 18th century were obsessed by this. Someone like William Pitt, paymaster of the armed forces in the 1740s, his reputation was made by the fact that he was the first paymaster who didn't make a fortune from the office. And he became a major 18th century hero, as you know. Washington was caught up in this, in this obsession with disinterestedness, and tried to live up to it. He didn't go to college. He hadn't a liberal arts education, which was designed, of course, to teach you disinterestedness. You learn Latin so you could get access to the to Cicero and others to learn how to behave as a political leader. Washington took this, because he lacked a college education, took these ideas more seriously than others. He actually served without pay, as commander-in-chief, served without pay, and tried to serve as president without pay, while the Congress wouldn't let him. But this idea was shared by others. Benjamin Franklin, in the Constitutional Convention of 1787, made as one of his few proposals that the whole executive branch, from the president on down, serve without salaries, without pay. Well, there was a long pause after he made that suggestion, and Madison noted, well, the motion was tabled more out of respect for the old man than out of the practicality of his scheme. But Washington took it very seriously, and there's no clearer evidence of that obsession than an experience he had in the winter of 1784-85, when the Virginia Assembly awarded him 150 shares in canal companies for his having promoted canals. Well, Washington was stunned by this gift from the Assembly. What could he do? Could he take it? It would seem to be in the nature of a pension, he said, and it would be embarrassing to him. He wrote to everybody he could think of, all of his friends, the same letter, and you can look him up in the Washington papers. He said, what should I do? He wrote to Jefferson, he wrote to Benjamin Harrison, he wrote to Henry Knox, he wrote to Nathaniel Greene, he even wrote to Lord Fairfax in England, and also to Lafayette in Paris. What should I do with these shares? Can I keep them, or what should I do? He said, I don't want to refuse the gift because it would be disrespectful. And he said, and it would be, I don't want to appear ostentatiously disinterested in refusing them. What should he do? And he went on to say, it would tarnish my reputation. It would destroy, and he was very self-conscious about his character. He said, it would destroy the one thing most outstanding in my character, which is my disinterested behavior. Well, I don't think there's, it's kind of laughable today, but for him, it was a matter of real anguish. I can't think of any decision that he worried more than this one. Well, finally, Jefferson came through with a solution. He said, why don't you take the shares and then give them away? And that's, of course, what he did. He took them and gave them to a little college in the western part of the state, which became Washington College, later Washington and Lee University. Now, we've lost that kind of feeling about disinterestedness in our political leaders. There's still some semblance of it because we still recognize corruption. We don't expect our leaders to make money while they're in office. They make their money after they retire from office, but not while they're serving. And we've actually had in Rhode Island here a recent case of our Speaker of the House accepting a bribe and having to retire. So we still have some semblance of this older notion. But by and large, we've passed it and have this newer notion of not caring, uninterested. But there's one occupational group, I think, that we really count on remaining disinterested. And I used to think it was judges, but I think judges have become so partial and partisan that we no longer count on judges being disinterested. That is, impartial, objective. But there is one group, you can probably guess, it's sports umpires and referees. A whole multi-billion-dollar industry rests on it. A kid grows up in Boston as a Red Sox fan, and he's umpiring that game this afternoon, between the Yankees and Red Sox, and we just count on him transcending his emotional commitment to the Red Sox and being disinterested. So there is some hope that there are some people left in the country who are like Washington. Thank you.